So, heard about these twin boys, identical twins. There were, mother couldn't keep them. They were adopted at birth. And one boy was adopted by a family in Mexico. They named him Juan. Another family from Algiers adopted the second, and they named him Amal. And when the mother was grown, she just, well, she was grown, but when the boys were about grown, the mother decided she wanted to reconnect. She wanted to connect with her son, so she got her husband. They tracked him down, and they went to Mexico and visited Juan, and it went beautifully. It went great. And she said, "I got to go." And her husband said, "No, it's too far. I can't take you to Algiers." He says, "Besides, they're identical twins. If you've seen Juan, you've seen them all." Excuse me while I get a cup of coffee.
Which one of these is most like the Bible that
Oh, yeah.
Dave reads out of? This is a Bible like,
I think he has New Testament. I mean, not New Testament, duh. I think you have NIV. Do you have NIV?
Yeah.
But I Revised Standard. I don't think it's either one. I don't think it's any of these.
okay.
No, I don't think you're going to get it.
I
The
think
one
maybe
closest.
this one, yeah.
Mhm. Is that the only four that they are?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's New International Version. I don't know what the Revised Standard is of that one.
You
Maybe a
have
King
Revised
James.
Standard?
She's got 4 different translations. There's King James, which even when I know the Bible, I don't understand what I'm reading. I put it in. I thought I put it in. And then what was the other one? Revised Standard.
We grew up on the Revised Standard. We thought that was the only.
But what is that? Revised Standard of, revised of what? Which version? King James?
It was done by a different group, but they just called it the Revised Standard. I don't know. That's what I grew
Because
up.
like this is a New American Standard and Revised version,
I know
updated
that's
version.
not
or something.
exact, but this one seems to
That
be.
Living Translation seems the closest.
I don't know.
And then Amplified is just, I mean, that's hard to follow.
Yeah, they just throw in all
Throws in all the
the
adjectives or
explain
whatever.
as we go. All right, well, welcome to the Love Your Life workshop once again. And, just always coming back to thinking about what does it mean to, who's the person I really want to be? And I just keep coming back to thinking about giving ourselves, or giving myself the things that make me work right, My son had a brand new car at one point, my older son, and a friend, guess you call him a friend, decided to play a prank, and he put, well, I'm not even going to tell you what he put, but he put something that wasn't gasoline in his gas tank.
You can tell.
I can tell him? All right, he peed in a bottle for like 2 days, and then poured it in his gas tank, and it ruined the gas tank. And,
Kidding.
it was a brand new car, so it was under warranty. But they kind of discovered it because they said whatever the substance was your gas was full of sugar.
No kidding.
So he had drunk like tons of soda to make himself go, and then he filled it with his gas tank.
No kidding.
Anyway, it sounds kind of funny, but a car doesn't work when you put the wrong thing in it. You know what I mean? And I think about just that application to our bodies, to our spirits. And I like to think that one thing that we do when we get together is remind ourselves to feed our minds, feed our spirits, the things that make it run. And sometimes it just doesn't run, and it's as simple as putting urine in a gas tank.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, well, what am I feeding my head? I can spend so much time feeding my head negative thoughts and just, self-defeating thoughts. And then you can kind of wake up sometimes and think, what am I doing? No wonder I'm depressed, or no wonder I just don't feel right. No wonder things aren't moving the way they should. And I may have described it. I remember a time a few years ago when I just kind of one day thought, you know, as much as I'm trying to just have a good relationship with God and I'm trying to serve and love people, I'm just kind of weighed down with guilt. And I thought, and suddenly it hit me, well, you know, we just shared this communion. Isn't the purpose of the communion to remember that God said, you know, here, I'm giving my son because I love you and I forgive you. So why am I living with guilt? You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, if you live with guilt, it's kind of like pouring urine in your gas tank, you know? If you live with just regret, then it's like, same thing as pouring that in your gas tank. It's not, that's not how we're meant to live. And yet we can get caught up in those things. So that's just kind of my introduction today to Love Your Life Workshop is feeding our gas tank or feeding our souls, our spirits with good things. So I want to talk for a few minutes about what I've been thinking about is practicing seeing people as people. Practicing seeing people as people, and that being a good thing. All right? Sometimes we think we see people as people, and it makes us cynical because we think we're just seeing people as people. And there's a way that we can look at people and become cynical about life, you know. But really, this idea of seeing people as people, and that becomes our, I don't want to say focus, that becomes the movement of our lives is to see people. The intent of my days is to see people. And it's amazing to me the things I don't see. I was running today and I ran past the library, and on this wall it says Cecil County Library. I probably run by, I can't tell you how many times I've run or jogged past that. And today I happened to look over it and I thought, I don't remember seeing those words there before. You know? But I can be that way. I cannot see obvious things out there. And that can be funny. We all see different things, have different strengths. But what's not as, and I can live with that. But I've always been intrigued and wanted to see people and not miss people. And not to kick myself about it when I don't. But that's the movement of my life. The person I most want to be is a person who, as I go through my day, to remember that seeing people is the most important thing. Because the most important thing can be to stay on my time schedule. The most important thing can be to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And those things sometimes have to be done. You know, the most important thing can be following my rigid belief system and making and rejecting people who don't agree with me. The most important thing can be my political views. You know, and so there's all these things that can kind of become the most important thing. But the most important thing to see people. When I was a kid, you know, I grew up, my dad was a minister, he's a preacher, and I remember this feeling of, you know, for me anyway, as a kid growing up in a very Christian home, I was always looking for a way to be off the hook. You know, it's like we go and we learn about all this stuff, we were in church all the time, but it's kind of like if you come home, and like my dad tended to be somewhat of a negative person, you know. So if you come home and Dad's like sitting around and maybe complaining about somebody at church, it kind of lets you off the hook. Oh, okay, well that's okay, you know. I can be nice, but there's a limit right here because Dad's doing so. But you know, my mom would never let us off the hook, you know. And it wasn't so much what she said, it was how she lived. And I think I shared with some of you guys, it wasn't until years and years later I said to my mom, I was in college, I said, why is Dad so negative? And it was probably after I was complaining about that woman that Glenn was, you know, I'm just, so I was negative myself, you know, but why is Dad so negative? And she said, well, his mother was the most negative person I ever knew in my life. So that kind of told me something about my dad, you know, and also, you know, because my mom would, it's rare for her to say anything like that. But my mom, and it wasn't so much that she wouldn't let us off the hook like a disciplinarian. It was that she would not let us off the hook by her life. She saw people. And so when we were at church and she would invite people home for lunch on Sunday a lot, but she always saw the people that nobody else would invite home, you know. And she looked around for if there was somebody visiting or even somebody had been there, she looked around for the people nobody else was talking to much or talking to at all. And which really made an impression on me more when I was older. You know, at the time I noticed it, but I didn't, you know, as a kid I wasn't like, wow, that's really inspiring, you know. But as I got older, it was inspiring. And so this idea of seeing people and that being the most important thing, you know, is a huge thing. For me, it's a huge thing. And I remember at being a young person who was shy, I always felt kind of shy and backwards, you know, in some ways. I mean, talk about growing up in the same home, and I was one of 7, and we are all completely different, you know. I have siblings like my sister next to me. She doesn't seem shy at all. She just went out, and she goes, and my older brother, and of course he was the oldest, and just did things, and I was like, you know, very shy, introverted, I thought. But even so, I was consumed with this idea of wanting to break out of that and to be comfortable with people, with all kinds of people. And what really got me going when I was about 9th grade was a challenge. I started looking at Jesus and noticing that's the way he was. And being challenged by people like my mom, she wasn't the only one, but people who just saw people, you know, and not saw them in terms of do they measure up, or what, you know, or are they going to respond in a way that's favorable? In other words, you know, like sometimes we can do it, you know, where you're going to love or be kind to somebody as long as they respond in a certain way that you want them to respond. But it was no, just to be kind and to be loving to people, kind of, because that feeds your soul. That's pouring good stuff into your gas tank, you know, just to be that way. So I began to look at Jesus, and I'm just going to share one story with you, which I think I've shared in the past, but not everybody probably has heard it. But you know, there's a story in John chapter 9 where and I really take this from something I heard a long time ago, and so I just have adapted a little bit to my own life. But Jesus and his group are walking along, and they see a man who was a blind beggar. And before they even get to him, they say to Jesus, "Why is this guy blind? Is it his parents' fault or his fault?" And on one hand, we might say, well, that was a common belief at the time, that, you know, if you were blind or something like that, that somebody did something wrong to cause it. But what it makes me think is that we're not that much different, you know? We're not that much different. Unfortunately, we can look at somebody's life, and if it doesn't go right, it's easy to become judgmental. Well, they did something wrong, you know? That's why I kind of love about the diversity here and everybody sharing their stories. And it's not right and wrong, it's your story, you know? And I feel like that's the way Jesus would look at it. It's just your story. But I remember growing up in a very close-knit community where, you know, boy, you wouldn't dare share your story because, you know, I grew up in a close-knit community where not many people were divorced. Of course, you know, back in when we were growing up, there weren't many people divorced. And I remember somebody in church was divorced. In the back of your mind, or maybe even was said, you know, boy, something, it was like lower class Christian, you know what I mean? And so then when I get divorced, I'm like, and I know how some people are thinking about me, and so it's like, it would almost be like, that guy's divorced. Well, who sinned? He or his wife or both? Or his parents. Maybe his parents didn't raise him right, So here's these disciples, and they're like, this guy's blind. He was born blind, so who did something wrong? And Jesus, and another thing it makes me think of is that it's so much easier to discuss a person than to just love them, just to see them. So much easier to turn them into a religious question if you're a religious person, or a political question, or just a question. And Jesus said, well, neither of you are right, Just to paraphrase, he said, he's born blind so God could be done. God's work could be seen in his life. And then what a beautiful, beautiful view of a person. Every person, we all have our stories, and in that story, the whole purpose is so that, we're part of this glorious universe and creation of God, and no matter what your story, God's work can be seen in it. It's a beautiful thing, So Jesus does what he does, and which is in a way a point, but not the point of the story if we get lost on the miraculous part, because the whole greatness of this story is the human part. So Jesus goes and he does something to this guy and tells him to leave, and he's healed of his blindness and doesn't know who Jesus is. And I think that's a cool part of the story. Jesus doesn't say, hello, I'm Jesus, and explain the whole thing. Here's my card, Son of God. Would you like to join my entourage here? And I healed. No, here's this man born blind beggar. No doubt, probably in this community, and wasn't asking for anything, but here's these guys who had been with Jesus who don't just, why isn't their first thought, Jesus, look at this guy, can you help him? And I kind of relate to that as a kid because, I kind of resented my mom bringing all the people over, especially the less cool people, And there was times when it would be just like, do you have to help everyone? Do you have to, I remember Christmas Day when I was 13, we lived in Oregon.